The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Royal Lexington Hotel, casting golden hues across the polished marble floors and ornate walls of Manhattan's most opulent establishment. The clock had just ticked past 9 a.m. when Amara stepped off the service elevator onto the top floor. Clad in her crisp, navy uniform and white apron, she moved with quiet efficiency, the soft squeak of her sneakers the only sound in the hushed corridor. The penthouse suite, room 5101, was on her list for deep cleaning. It had been unoccupied for 2 days, and today was her turn to prepare it for the next guest. She balanced a cleaning cart beside the door, swiped her key card, and stepped into the luxurious suite. Room 5101 was everything one imagined a billionaire's temporary home would be: vast ceilings adorned with chandeliers, velvet drapes that kissed the floor, and furniture so pristine it seemed more like art than comfort. Amara didn't marvel at it anymore. Her job was to make things spotless, not to get lost in admiration. Still, she appreciated the quietness of the suite. No children running through halls, no clumsy businessmen muttering into Bluetooth earpieces. Just the rhythmic swish of her duster, the hum of the vacuum, and the occasional chirp of her walkie-talkie. Amara was known among the staff as the Phantom. She appeared and disappeared silently, did her job to perfection, and never shared more than necessary. Unlike the others who gossiped in the break room or exchanged weekend plans, Amara kept to herself. No one knew where she lived, who she lived with, or even if she had family in the States. But she was never late, never complained, and never let a fingerprint remain on a faucet handle. She was fluffing the last of the decorative pillows on the velvet sofa when the landline rang. Its shrill tones sliced through the silence like a blade. Amara froze. The phone was meant for guest use, and staff were strictly prohibited from answering it unless directed by a supervisor. But there was no guest scheduled for the suite today. She had checked the log twice. It was marked for cleaning, not occupancy. The phone rang again. Then a third time. She glanced toward the door as if expecting someone to appear and tell her what to do. No one came. Her hand hovered over the receiver. Maybe it was the front desk. Maybe they were trying to reach housekeeping through the suite phone. Just a few seconds. No one would know. With a quiet breath, she picked it up. "Hello, Ja." "Met Amara," she said instinctively. The words rolled out of her mouth smoothly, naturally. Dutch, fluent and precise. There was a pause on the other end. Then a flurry of words in Dutch, urgent and clipped. Amara's brow furrowed. She stepped away from the center of the room and lowered her voice. Her tone was calm, but her fingers gripped the phone a little tighter. "Nee, dat kan niet," she said. "Ike heb als actor gelaten. Ike will er niets me to make in hebben." Her face tightened. "Luister, je moet me met rust laten. Dit is niet het moment." The call ended in less than a minute, but the weight of it lingered in the room like smoke. Amara placed the receiver down gently, almost reverently, as though she were burying a piece of her past. Her shoulders tensed. She remained still for a few moments, eyes closed, as if steadying herself. Then, without a word, she returned to cleaning, her motions just slightly less fluid, her movements a fraction heavier. What Amara didn't know was that someone had been standing outside the suite during her conversation. Willem de Vries had returned to the hotel unannounced. As one of the primary investors behind the Royal Lexington, he often conducted surprise visits. Dressed simply in a charcoal suit with no tie and a clean-shaven face, he was tall, imposing, but not flashy. His presence exuded the quiet confidence of a man who had seen the world and conquered it. The concierge had given him a master key card, but in his haste, he had left it at the front desk and had gone upstairs directly from his car. When he reached the penthouse, he found the door ajar and paused. He heard a woman's voice, not just speaking Dutch, but speaking it with an accent he hadn't heard since his childhood in Utrecht. It wasn't textbook Dutch. It was intimate, local, familiar. He stood there, stunned, as her voice floated out, "Ik wil er niets mee te maken hebben. I want nothing to do with it." When the call ended, and he heard her resume cleaning, he stepped away, mind racing. Back downstairs, Willem approached the concierge desk. "Who is cleaning the penthouse suite this morning?" The concierge, taken aback, fumbled through his digital tablet. "That would be Amara. She's been with us almost a year. Housekeeping. Her full name. She goes by Amara only. No last name listed in the internal directory. I can call the supervisor if you'd like." Willem waved him off. "No need. But please let her know I'd like to speak with her before she ends her shift. Privately." The concierge nodded, a little confused. Willem de Vries didn't usually ask to speak with the housekeeping staff. He was polite to everyone, yes, but direct and to the point. A request like this felt personal. Upstairs, Amara had just finished restocking the minibar when her walkie crackled. "Amara, can you come to the manager's office when you're done with the penthouse? Mr. de Vries would like to speak with you." The walkie fell silent. Amara stared at it like it had betrayed her. She felt her throat tighten. The name stirred something. Not fear, exactly. Something older. Memories blurred by time and buried by willpower. She hadn't heard that name aloud in years, but she knew it. Everyone who followed global finance or European luxury had heard of Willem de Vries, a man who turned dying family brands into empires. Dutch royalty in everything but blood. She stood motionless for a moment, her mind spinning through scenarios. Had he recognized her voice? Was the call somehow related to him? No, that was impossible. It had been a decade. She had changed countries, changed lives. She was invisible now, hidden. Amara finished her duties with mechanical precision. She wiped every surface twice, replaced the towels, rechecked the minibar, and vacuumed the rug. Her hands moved, but her mind was elsewhere. By the time she reached the manager's office, her expression was neutral, composed. But her heart was thudding. The manager, a nervous man named Joseph, who rarely interacted with staff outside of payroll meetings, gave her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Amara, thank you for coming. Mr. de Vries is waiting in the lounge. He just wants a quick word." "Don't worry, you're not in trouble." She nodded silently. Outside the lounge, she took one breath, then another. Then she stepped in. Willem was seated on a leather armchair, a glass of water on the table beside him. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Amara," he said, standing. "Please sit." She didn't. "You asked to speak with me." Willem smiled faintly. "I did. You answered a call this morning in Dutch." Amara froze. She didn't confirm or deny. "You said your name. You spoke like someone who hasn't just studied Dutch, but lived it." She remained silent. He studied her. "You sound like you're from Utrecht." "That's where I grew up." Amara finally spoke. "Why does it matter, Mr. de Vries?" "Because people don't just disappear," he said. "Not really. And voices carry, even across oceans." Her eyes met his for the first time. "Calm. guarded, defiant. "You think you know who I am," she said. "But you don't." Willem didn't argue. He nodded slowly. "Then maybe you could help me understand." Amara hesitated, then turned toward the door. "Some of us aren't meant to be understood," she said. "Some of us just clean the rooms no one looks into." And with that, she walked away, leaving Willem alone with the echo of her voice, a voice he hadn't realized he'd been missing until now. And outside, in the quiet hallway, Amara allowed herself the smallest tremble. She had buried the past so deeply, it shocked her how easily it could be unearthed by a single word. Or a single call. The sun dipped low over Manhattan, casting elongated shadows across the Royal Lexington Hotel's grand facade. Inside, the opulent lounge buzzed with subdued conversations and the clinking of fine china. Amara stood at the threshold, her heart pounding as she prepared to face Willem de Vries once more. Willem rose from his seat, offering a warm smile. "Amara, thank you for coming?" She nodded, her posture poised yet guarded. "You wished to speak with me?" "Yes." He gestured to the seat opposite him. "Please, join me." Reluctantly, she sat, her eyes scanning the room before settling on him. The weight of unspoken questions hung heavily between them. "I couldn't help but notice your fluency in Dutch," Willem began, his tone gentle. "It's rare to hear such authenticity outside the Netherlands." Amara's gaze remained steady. "I spent my early years in Utrecht." "Ah, that explains it." He leaned back, studying her. "But what brings someone from Utrecht to housekeeping in Manhattan?" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Life has its paths. Some are chosen, others not so much." Willem nodded, sensing the depth behind her words. "I understand. Sometimes the journey is as telling as the destination." A moment of silence ensued, filled only by the distant hum of the city. "Amara," he said, leaning forward, "I have a proposition. Would you consider joining me for coffee tomorrow? Just a chat. No expectations." She raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident. "Why?" "Because I believe there's more to your story, and I'd like to understand it. Perhaps, in doing so, we might find common ground." She pondered his offer, the walls she'd built over the years urging caution. Yet part of her was curious. "All right," she replied, her voice measured. "One coffee." The next morning, Amara found herself at a quaint Café Hauser 9 nestled in a quiet corner of the city. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of baked goods, creating a comforting ambience. Willem arrived promptly, his demeanor relaxed yet attentive. They exchanged pleasantries before settling into a booth by the window. As they sipped their drinks, the conversation flowed, touching on mundane topics before gradually delving deeper. "Tell me about your time in Utrecht," Willem prompted. Amara's eyes softened, memories surfacing. It was a different life, simpler in some ways, complicated in others. "Family," she nodded. "My parents were educators. They valued knowledge and instilled in me a love for languages." "That explains your fluency," he smiled. "And after Utrecht?" Her expression darkened slightly. "Circumstances changed. We moved, and eventually I found myself here." Willem sensed the shift and chose not to press further. Instead, he shared snippets of his own journey, from his early days in business to his ventures across the globe. Their conversation meandered, weaving through past experiences, shared interests, and philosophical musings. Time seemed to blur, the initial barriers between them gradually dissolving. As they parted ways, Willem extended his hand. "Thank you for sharing your time and thoughts." Amara shook his hand, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Thank you for listening. In the days that followed, their interactions became more frequent. Casual conversations turned into deeper discussions, each revealing layers previously hidden. Amara found herself opening up, sharing fragments of her past she'd long kept buried. Willem, in turn, offered insights into his world, bridging the gap between their disparate lives. Yet, amidst the growing camaraderie, Amara remained cautious. The shadows of her past loomed, reminding her of the fragility of trust. One evening, as they strolled through Central Park, Willem paused, turning to her. "Amara, I value our connection, but I sense there's more you're holding back." She looked away, the weight of secrets pressing heavily. "There are things I can't share." "Not yet." He nodded, respecting her boundaries. "Whenever you're ready." Back at the hotel, Amara sat alone, reflecting on their conversations. The walls she'd meticulously built were showing cracks, emotions she'd suppressed resurfacing. She knew that opening up further could change everything. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to confront the past and embrace the possibilities of the present. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Royal Lexington Hotel's cafe, casting a warm glow over the polished marble floors. Amara sat at a corner table, her navy uniform crisp, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in her hands. Across from her, Willem de Vries, dressed in a simple blazer and jeans, exuded a casual elegance that belied his billionaire status. Their conversation began with pleasantries, but soon delved deeper. Willem's curiosity about Amara's past was evident, and she found herself sharing more than she had intended. She spoke of her childhood in Utrecht, the daughter of a Dutch, Ghanaian professor and a Belgian art historian. Her home had been filled with books, art, and the hum of intellectual discourse. But tragedy struck when her father died suddenly, leaving her mother to grapple with grief and financial hardship. Seeking a fresh start, her mother moved them to the United States. Amara, still a teenager, found herself navigating a new culture while trying to support her family. She fell in love too young, trusted too easily, and soon bore the responsibility of raising her younger brother. Low-wage jobs became her norm, each one a stepping stone to keep them afloat. Willem listened intently, his gaze never wavering. When she finished, he leaned in, his voice soft but firm. "You deserve more than this. I want you to come work for my foundation." Amara's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because I speak Dutch. Because I have a story." He nodded. "Yes. Because I think your story might change the lives of others. And because I never forget brilliance when I see it." She looked away, the weight of his words settling over her. The offer was tempting, but her past was a tapestry of secrets and stains she wasn't ready to unveil. Later that day, Amara returned to her modest apartment, the envelope from the Netherlands police still unopened on her kitchen table. She had received it the day before, a stark reminder of a past she had tried to forget. Her estranged uncle, once a world-renowned painter, had died and left her a massive inheritance. But there were conditions tied to her identity and legal status in Europe. She picked up the envelope, her fingers trembling. Inside was a letter detailing the inheritance and the stipulations attached. To claim it, she would need to return to the Netherlands, confront her past, and reclaim an identity she had long since buried. The next morning, Amara met Willem in his office. The walls were adorned with contemporary art, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and leather. She handed him the letter, watching as he read it, his brow furrowing. "This changes things," he said finally. But it also opens doors. Amara nodded. I'm not sure I'm ready to walk through them. Willem leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Sometimes, the only way to move forward is to face what's behind us. She sighed, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. I need time. Take all the time you need, he said. But know that whatever you decide, you won't be alone. As she left his office, Amara felt a mix of fear and hope. The secrets and stains of her past were daunting, but perhaps, with Willem's support, she could find the strength to confront them. 3 months had passed since the letter, the inheritance, and the decision that changed everything. New York's late spring air was brisk with anticipation, and the city, which had always rushed past Amara like a blur of horns and footsteps, now seemed to pause for her. Headlines had buzzed across international art and philanthropy circles. Dutch billionaire discovers hidden talent in Manhattan hotel Maid, a phrase that made Amara wince, not because of shame, but because of how much was left unsaid between the lines. What the headlines never captured was the moment she stood in her kitchen at 2 a.m., alone with trembling hands, opening that letter from the Dutch authorities. What they didn't know was that Willem hadn't just made an offer. He had believed in her story, funded the DNA test that reconnected her with her late uncle's estate, and sent a team of legal experts to handle every twist of red tape that had once made her past feel like a locked door. The inheritance was vast: paintings, property, royalties from her uncle's work, and she could have disappeared into a life of ease. But Amara had known from the start that she wouldn't. Instead, she used the first portion of the inheritance to establish the Umoja Foundation, a nonprofit in Manhattan aimed at supporting immigrant women like herself. Those cleaning rooms, raising children surviving in shadows. The foundation offered legal aid, job training, and scholarships to women who spoke languages no one bothered to listen to and who had stories that could fill libraries if only someone would ask. Amara didn't just write checks. She sat in those offices, held hands during asylum interviews, translated court letters, and cried in bathrooms with women who reminded her of her mother. The rest of the inheritance she poured into something more personal, a gallery, but not just any gallery. The Ajiman Gallery of Modern Expression, housed in a renovated Soho loft with brick walls, arched windows, and a soul that breathed through every exhibit. At its heart was a permanent collection of her late uncle's paintings. Hundreds of them, unseen by the public, stored in crates and attics across the Netherlands. Many had never been cataloged. Others had been dismissed as eccentric, too raw, too African, too emotional. Amara reclaimed them all, framing them with care, spotlighting their genius. But in the northeast corner of the gallery stood a single room, painted a deep shade of ocean blue, its entrance framed by brass letters that read, "The Maid Who Spoke Dutch." That was her personal curation, a tribute not just to herself, but to the invisible labor that built cities, raised nations, and held families together. Opening night arrived on a Friday, the air warm with early summer, and the gallery shimmered with soft lighting and the scent of fresh lilies. People came from all over: collectors, critics, community leaders, curious tourists, and immigrants who had read about Amara in local papers and seen someone they recognized in her eyes. Amara wore a simple midnight blue dress with Ghanaian gold earrings her mother had given her before her passing. Her brother, now a college sophomore on a full scholarship, stood beside her in a tailored suit, proud and nervous, whispering encouragement. Journalists approached, but Amara answered sparingly. Tonight wasn't about interviews. It was about arrival. It was about belonging. As the crowd filtered through the gallery, taking in the vivid strokes of her uncle's work, some paused longer in the curated room, where Amara had placed photos of maids, caretakers, janitors, and street vendors, alongside painted portraits and audio recordings of their stories. One woman wept softly, standing before a self-portrait of Amara in her old hotel uniform, her name tag still visible. Above it, in calligraphy, were the words, "This uniform does not erase my past. It carries it." And then, near the end of the night, as the buzz softened and the wine glasses emptied, Amara stood alone before a portrait painted decades ago. Her face at 6 years old, painted by her uncle during the summer they'd spent together before he vanished into fame and addiction. She remembered that day. The smell of linseed oil, the sun on her cheeks, the way he had smiled and said, "Hold still, Minjin princes." Her eyes welled up. So much had been taken from her, and yet here she stood, reclaiming every loss with grace and fire. She felt someone step beside her, tall, calm, familiar. Willem, dressed simply in a gray suit and no tie, his presence was quiet but solid. She didn't turn to face him. She didn't need to. "You did this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "No," he replied, his tone low and certain. "You were always meant to. I just answered the call." She turned to look at him then, really look, and for the first time, she didn't see a billionaire or a savior. She saw a friend, a partner in this strange, beautiful journey. He had shown up when no one else had, and he had stayed, not to take credit, but to bear witness. There were no romantic undertones between them, no fairy tale resolution, just mutual respect, born from shared moments of courage and vulnerability. They smiled, not as Maid and Millionaire, but as equals, bound by language, timing, and the choice to listen when no one else did. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lights had dimmed, Amara walked through the gallery barefoot, holding a glass of wine and letting her fingers trace the edges of canvas and frame. She paused in front of one last exhibit, a mirror surrounded by empty frames. Below it, plaque reedy, "And what will your story be?" Amara looked into the mirror and smiled. It was only the beginning.